On February 22, 2026, the Mexican military killed the man who ran an organization worth an estimated $50 billion. A man who grew avocados as a child and dropped out of primary school. His name was Nemesio Oseguera Cervantes, and the story of how he went from a dirt-poor village in Michoacan to becoming the most wanted person in the Western Hemisphere is one for the ages. So let's go through how a man nicknamed El Mencho built a cartel that operated in over 40 countries, shot down military helicopters, and had a $15 million bounty on his head. On the morning of February 22, 2026, a team of Mexican Army Special Forces closed in on a gated residential compound in Tapalpa, a quiet mountain town about 2 hours southwest of Guadalajara in western Mexico. Their target was Nemesio Oseguera Cervantes, the elusive founder and supreme commander of the Jalisco New Generation Cartel, known as CJNG. At the time, he was Mexico's most wanted man, with a $15 million US bounty on his head. 6 helicopters provided air cover while ground troops closed a cordon, guided by a multi-year intelligence effort that culminated in the tracking of a trusted associate linked to one of El Mencho's romantic partners. Early that Sunday, an operational force composed of 3 elements moved in: an airmobile unit supported by 6 helicopters, air cover provided by Texan aircraft, and ground units from Army Special Forces. The confrontation was immediate and violent. Cartel gunmen opened fire on the military, covering their leader as he and his inner circle fled into the dense forest surrounding the compound. Special Forces personnel pursued them, tracking the group through the brush. During the pursuit, a military helicopter was hit by gunfire and forced to make an emergency landing. In the ensuing firefight, Oseguera and 2 of his bodyguards were wounded. Oseguera was wounded, captured in nearby woodlands, and placed on a helicopter with 2 bodyguards and a wounded soldier for transfer to Mexico City. Mexico's Defense Secretariat said he died while being flown to Mexico City. 8 members of the CJNG were killed in the military operation. The man they called El Mencho, the man who had evaded every government on the planet for over a decade, was dead. But what happened next is what stunned the world. What followed was not a quiet surrender, but a furious wave of retaliation that lit up roads, airports, and cities across at least 20 Mexican states. Gunmen torched vehicles, set up burning blockades, and ambushed security forces, killing at least 25 National Guard troops in the first days alone. Mexico's security agency said Sunday night there were 252 blockades reported throughout the country. Cars burned out by cartel members, blocked roads in nearly a dozen Mexican states, and left smoke billowing into the air. Jalisco's capital, Guadalajara, was turned into a ghost town Sunday night as civilians hunkered down. School was canceled Monday in several states. U.S. tourists were stranded in a Mexican beach town after the wave of violence erupted. Airlines canceled flights to Puerto Vallarta, Guadalajara, and Mazatlan. The U.S. Embassy in Mexico urged Americans to shelter in place in multiple states, after images showed vehicles set on fire and smoke rising above beachfront hotels in Puerto Vallarta. This was the final chapter in the life of a man who built one of the most feared criminal organizations on Earth. But to understand how his death plunged an entire nation into chaos, we have to go back to the beginning, to a dusty village in Michoacan, where a boy grew avocados and dreamed of something beyond the fields. Nemesio Oseguera Cervantes was born on July 17, 1966, in the rural community of Culotitlan in Aguililla, Michoacan. Born into poverty, El Mencho grew avocados and dropped out of primary school before immigrating illegally to the U.S. in the 1980s. Aguililla is one of those places where opportunity doesn't knock. It doesn't even know your address. In a region where drug cultivation had long been part of the local economy, the line between farming and crime was razor thin. Like many in rural Mexico facing limited opportunities, he ventured north to the United States in his youth, seeking work and a better life. It was there, amidst small-time drug dealing and petty offenses, that he first encountered the labyrinthine world of organized crime. His first taste of the American justice system came fast. In 1994, he was convicted in California for conspiracy to distribute heroin and served 3 years in a U.S. prison. He was eventually arrested on drug charges and deported back to Mexico, but he returned to the U.S. illegally. He was again arrested on drug charges in 1992, and after serving 3 years in prison and being released on parole, was deported to Mexico a second time. Back in Mexico, he began his rise to the top of one of the country's most powerful cartels. But that ascent didn't happen overnight. It was a measured, deliberate climb through layers of Mexico's extraordinarily dangerous criminal hierarchy. After he returned to Mexico, he worked as a police officer in the western state of Jalisco, but soon resumed his criminal activities. Here is a detail that often gets overlooked. The man who would become Mexico's most wanted criminal once wore a badge. He walked the streets as a lawman, learned how law enforcement worked from the inside, its methods, its vulnerabilities, its blind spots, and then used every piece of that knowledge to build a machine designed to operate permanently beyond the law's reach. Osguerra had a long career in brutality before forming CJNG. For a time, he served as chief of hitmen, or key enforcer for the Milenio Cartel, before overseeing security and operational violence for the famed Sinaloa Cartel. He was essentially the man cartels called when they needed violence, handled efficiently and quietly. A reputation that earned him trust in the darkest boardrooms of the Mexican underworld. After working in a group of hitmen that protected Armando Valencia Cornelio, alias El Maradona, El Mencho joined a block of the Milenio Cartel, allied with Ignacio Coronel Villarreal, alias Nacho Coronel, a Sinaloa cartel capo. This group trafficked drugs, managed finances, and served as killers for the Sinaloa cartel in the states of Jalisco and Colima. But Mexico's criminal landscape is one of perpetual collapse and reconstruction. Alliances dissolve, leaders get arrested or killed, power vacuums open up like sinkholes, and the men ready to fill them move with terrifying speed. By 2010, following the death of Nacho Coronel and the capture of the leader of the Milenio Cartel, Oscar Orlando Nava Valencia, the Milenio Cartel split into two factions, Los Torcidos and La Resistencia. These two divisions began a battle for control of drug trafficking in Jalisco, and Los Torcidos became what is now the CJNG, with El Mencho as its leader. And it was this pivotal moment, the wreckage of the Milenio Cartel, that gave Nemesio Oseguera Cervantes the opening he needed to reinvent himself. He wasn't just going to join a new cartel, he was going to build one from scratch, one that would make the Sinaloa cartel look over its shoulder. In reality, El Mencho reached the cartel's leadership through a strategy of diplomacy via marriage. Public security analyst David Saucedo told CNN, according to the DEA, CJNG emerged in the 2010s from the remnants of the Milenio Cartel, which splintered amid a power vacuum after its leader was captured in 2009. Oseguera built the group with Abigail Gonzalez Valencia, leader of Los Queenies, a family-based cartel operating in Michoacán, which served as the financial and logistical arm of CJNG. Marrying into the Gonzalez Valencia family wasn't just a personal decision, it was a corporate merger. The financial infrastructure of Los Queenies gave El Mencho something most cartel startups never get: immediate access to billions of dollars in money laundering operations that spanned continents. What set CJNG apart from every other cartel in Mexico's blood-soaked history was El Mencho's willingness to treat the organization not as a gang, but as a paramilitary force with a franchise business model. From the very beginning, he designed CJNG to project terror not just through drugs, but through a level of coordinated violence that Mexico had never seen. His leadership style combined business efficiency with ruthless violence. The CJNG adopted paramilitary tactics rarely seen at such a scale in organized crime, deploying armored vehicles, heavy weapons, rocket launchers, and uniformed gunmen. The cartel frequently released propaganda videos showing convoys of fighters to project power and intimidate opponents. The CJNG was not a loose criminal gang, but a paramilitary enterprise with an estimated 15,000 to 20,000 members, operating in more than 20 Mexican states. Below El Mencho, specialized armed units carried out distinct military functions. The Grupo Elite, the cartel's main armed wing used for territorial conquest, Fuerzas Especiales Mencho, a personal protection force, and Operadores Droneros, a dedicated drone unit conducting intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance, and targeted killings since at least 2017. Think about that for a moment. This was a drug cartel with its own special forces, its own drone division, and its own intelligence apparatus. The DEA said the gang was structured like a franchise business, composed of around 90 organizations that operated under the CJNG umbrella. This structure made it extraordinarily resilient because no single arrest or raid could cripple the whole network. The moment that truly announced CJNG's arrival on the world stage came on May 1, 2015. Before dawn, an armed convoy from the CJNG made their way from Casimiro Castillo to Villa Purificación via dirt roads. The vehicles drove with their headlights off to avoid detection by the Mexican Air Force and the federal police, who were doing air surveillance of the area in 4 helicopters. One of the vehicles was equipped with rocket-propelled grenade launchers. As the helicopters flew over the convoy, the CJNG units opened fire. One of the helicopters, a Cougar EC-725 carrying 18 passengers, was hit on its tail with a Russian-made RPG-27 rocket launcher. As one of the helicopters flew over the convoy, the CJNG members shot it down using RPG launchers. 9 law enforcement officers died as a result of the attack. This was the first incident in the Mexican drug war in which organized crime had shot down a military helicopter. The helicopter attack and the roadblocks were a direct response to the attempted capture of El Mencho. Prior to the helicopter attack, El Mencho was spotted in Tonaya, Jalisco, which prompted a law enforcement offensive to apprehend him. His gunman defended him, and he was able to escape. This brazen escalation, shooting down the Mexican military's own aircraft, sent a message that reverberated through every government office in Mexico City and Washington, D.C. CJNG was not afraid of the state. It was prepared to fight the state head-on, like a hostile army. And yet, even after this spectacular display of force, El Mencho himself remained invisible. Wanted by authorities in Mexico and the U.S., Osguerra kept a low profile, so much so that only a handful of photographs of him exist. By rival cartels, El Mencho was known as the Ghost, because he was able to stay hidden for years while still maintaining control of CJNG. Rumors about his whereabouts were constant. In February 2022, various reports in the Mexican press stated that El Mencho had been killed in a CJNG confrontation with some of his rivals. Another rumor, spread by CJNG enemies on scrawled messages left around Guadalajara, stated that El Mencho had died of kidney failure in a hospital in that city. There were also unsupported reports that El Mencho had health problems. In July 2020, a medical center was reportedly built in rural Jalisco so that he could be treated for a kidney problem that had plagued him for some time. None of those rumors were confirmed. The ghost carried on. While El Mencho hid in the shadows, his cartel cast an ever-lengthening shadow of its own across the globe. The cartel generates billions of dollars annually. Its activities include drug trafficking to the United States, Canada, Australia, and multiple continents, as well as extortion, fuel theft, kidnapping, illegal logging, mining, migrant smuggling, and timeshare fraud. The group controls the port of Manzanillo, enabling importation of precursor chemicals for methamphetamine and fentanyl production. This was a strategic choke point that allowed CJNG to receive chemical shipments directly from China and funnel them into clandestine laboratories scattered across the mountains of Jalisco and Colima. CJNG is heavily involved in the production and trafficking of methamphetamine and fentanyl, with links to suppliers of chemical precursors in China, and controls several seaports for importing chemicals, according to U.S. authorities. El Mencho was able to make the CJNG one of Mexico's most profitable criminal gangs. The government estimates that El Mencho's group has about $50 billion in total assets. In 2019, Kyle Morey, the head of the DEA team tasked with locating El Mencho, stated in an interview with Univision that he believed El Mencho had a net worth of at least $500 million, and he could also be worth over $1 billion. Part of El Mencho's success in the drug trade had to do with his ability to strategize market and consumer changes. Initially, the CJNG produced methamphetamine, but then he moved to heroin production when the consumer demand changed, when fentanyl became the drug of choice for traffickers because of its staggering profit margins. Tiny to ship, enormously addictive. CJNG pivoted again. They became, according to the DEA, a key supplier of illicit fentanyl to the United States, reaping billions in profit. The violence that CJNG unleashed to protect this empire was not random. It was strategic and designed for maximum psychological impact. Chris Dalby, senior analyst at Diami Security Intelligence, told Al Jazeera, "The CJNG has normalized the worst horrors of the Mexican drug wars. Bodies hanging from lamp posts, decapitated heads on the side of the road. The violence was deliberate and performative, designed to dominate rivals quickly and discourage resistance. In 2019, 19 mutilated corpses were discovered in Uruapan, Michoacan. 9 were hung semi-naked from a bridge with a banner reading, "Lovely people, carry on with your routines," signed CJNG. At least 10 others were found dismembered nearby. The cartel didn't just terrorize civilians and rival criminals, it went after the state itself. In June 2020, an assassination attempt on Mexico City's Secretary of Public Security, Omar Garcia Harfuch, left 2 bodyguards and a bystander dead. While traveling to a meeting in an armored SUV, Garcia was attacked by CJNG members who had high-powered rifles, grenades, and body armor. He survived barely, and years later he would become the very security secretary who oversaw the response to El Mencho's death. CJNG has been accused of using fake job advertisements in an attempt to lure new members, then forcing the unsuspecting applicants to join the cartel. The cartel is alleged to have tortured or killed those who tried to resist or escape. In 2025, the remains of hundreds of CJNG recruits were discovered at a training camp known as the Izaguirre Ranch, highlighting the scale of internal and external violence. The international tentacles of the organization stretched further than any Mexican cartel before it. The group has contacts in over 40 countries, including the Americas, as well as in Australia, China, and Southeast Asia. According to the U.S. State Department, CJNG associates, facilitators, and affiliates operate in almost all 50 U.S. states. Former U.S. DEA official Paul Crane once described Oseguera as public enemy number 1 and said he commanded an army of thousands. All of this, the fentanyl, the violence, the global empire, was being orchestrated by a man nobody could photograph, nobody could locate, and nobody could touch, until a romantic partner led Mexican forces to a mountain cabin in Tapalpa. The intelligence that finally unraveled El Mencho's legendary concealment came not from wiretaps or informants, but from surveillance of one of his romantic partners. Surveillance confirmed the couple met at the location. Although the woman left the property on February 21st, intelligence indicated that El Mencho remained in that place. On February 22, 2026, after confirming Oseguera's presence, security forces initiated the raid on the gated community in Tapalpa. The assault was aided by 2 military helicopters. As federal troops advanced toward the property, CJNG gunmen opened fire, triggering an intense exchange of gunfire in the surrounding mountainous terrain. Cartel members used high-caliber firearms and other heavy weaponry in an attempt to repel the assault. During the initial confrontation, several cartel members were killed and others wounded. As security forces moved to secure the compound, amid the firefight, Oseguera attempted to escape into the surrounding terrain with 4 members of his security detail. A team of Special Forces personnel split off and pursued him beyond the main structure, leading to a second armed confrontation in the nearby wooded area. During this exchange, cartel gunmen continued firing at advancing troops, and a military helicopter providing aerial support was struck by gunfire. The operation involved a U.S. military-led task force specializing in cartel intelligence. The Joint Interagency Task Force Counter-Cartel, which had been mapping cartel networks on both sides of the border. The moment El Mencho's death was confirmed, the CJNG's response was coordinated and devastating. In the immediate aftermath of the operation, the CJNG launched coordinated retaliatory attacks across multiple states. Cartel members established approximately 250 roadblocks nationwide, using hijacked cargo trucks, buses, and private vehicles that were set on fire to obstruct highways and urban roads. Incidents were reported in Jalisco and numerous other states, including Michoacán, Guanajuato, Colima, Tamaulipas, Zacatecas, Aguascalientes, and Sinaloa. The Defense Ministry identified a senior CJNG figure known as El Tuli, El Mencho's right-hand man and a top financial operator within the cartel, as the organizer of coordinated attacks in Jalisco. Mexican authorities said he orchestrated roadblocks, arson attacks, and assaults on government facilities, and offered a bounty of 20,000 pesos, about $1,100, for the killing of each member of the military. Later the same day, security forces tracked him to El Grulo, a small town about 180 kilometers southwest of Guadalajara. He attempted to flee, firing on officers who killed him in the ensuing clash. 25 members of Mexico's National Guard were among those who died in clashes in Jalisco state. 8 members of the CJNG cartel were killed in the military operation itself. By Monday, authorities reported that at least 30 suspected gang members, 25 National Guard troops, and 1 civilian had been killed. In the unrest following the operation, the death of El Mencho immediately sparked fears of a new wave of violence in Mexico, and the possibility of internal cartel succession battles, all while Jalisco prepares to host part of the 2026 World Cup. The political implications were massive. The operation has been reported as a major security achievement for President Claudia Sheinbaum, highlighting closer cooperation with U.S. intelligence, with the White House confirming that the U.S. provided intelligence support for the operation. U.S. Deputy Secretary of State Christopher Landau described El Mencho as one of the bloodiest and most ruthless drug kingpins, and called his death a great development for Mexico, the U.S., Latin America, and the world. But the question that lingers, the one that no government official can answer with confidence, is whether any of this actually changes anything. Due to his son, Ruben Oseguera Gonzalez, El Menchito, being imprisoned in the United States, Oseguera did not have a direct successor upon his death. David Mora, a member of the International Crisis Group, said this would cause a power vacuum and could cause violent realignments within the organization. On March 18, 2026, the Wall Street Journal reported that Juan Carlos Valencia Gonzalez, El Mencho's stepson, was now the CJNG's new leader. On April 6, 2026, El País confirmed Valencia Gonzalez had successfully worked his way through the power vacuum created by El Mencho's death. The cartel didn't die with its founder. Its franchise model, 90 semi-autonomous organizations operating under one banner across more than 40 countries, ensured that no single bullet could bring it down. El Mencho's removal is like saying that a company is going to fail because you take out the CEO. Analyst Chris Dalby said, "Not at all. The flow of drugs is going to continue, and there are going to be plenty of pretenders to the throne." President Sheinbaum herself has previously criticized what she called the kingpin strategy, the approach of targeting leaders, noting that it tends to fracture organizations into competing factions that then fight bloodily for control. And history backs her up. While several senior drug kingpins were captured or killed under previous administrations, the crackdown led to violent fragmentation. Hundreds of thousands were killed or disappeared in the years that followed, yet criminal groups ultimately adapted and continued to expand. The killing of El Mencho has been called the most significant elimination of a cartel leader since Pablo Escobar. The avocado farmer from Aguililla who dropped out of primary school, crossed the border illegally, served time in American prisons, wore a police badge in Jalisco, worked as a hitman for the Sinaloa cartel, and then built his own $50 billion empire. That man is gone. But the machine he built, a machine that traffics fentanyl, methamphetamine, heroin, and cocaine to every corner of the planet, is still running. A former cartel member from a rival organization, when asked why the violence erupted so fiercely after El Mencho's death, put it simply, "It is an inauguration for the next leader of CJNG. The ghost is dead, but the machine doesn't need a ghost to keep running."